Hi, this is Dr. Jerome Cleofas, and you are listening to our first podcast for Practical Research 1. And this is all about the first unit and the first chapter, which is all about the nature of inquiry and research. So, for this specific podcast, we're going to be discussing the nature of inquiry. So, probably you are familiar with the phrase, you wouldn't know unless you ask, or seek and you shall find. When we talk about inquiry, it is very much like that. So, inquiry is a learning process that motivates you to obtain knowledge or information about people, things, places, or events by doing an investigation or asking questions. So, probably you might be curious about certain phenomena like probably how migrant Filipino workers are able to cope with sadness when they're abroad, or how people who have suffered from disasters are able to cope up and be able to rebuild their lives, or probably how a certain person with a certain mental health illness is able to live his day-to-day life. Inquiry-based learning suggests that in order for you to be able to learn about the things that you want to learn, you have to ask or investigate, to actively search for people or books or sources that will be able to give you the knowledge that you need. So compared to other types of teaching strategies, like for example, a lecture or something like a podcast like this, inquiry-based learning is actually an active learning process, which means that the student or the learner would go out of his way and really search for the knowledge that he needs, instead of him just sitting and listening to his teacher or listening to this podcast. So really, when you think about it, you probably have been doing inquiry-based learning in your day-to-day living. Like for example, if you want to know the conversion rate of the US dollar to peso, you just go to Google. Like you type in your question or query in the search box, and usually you have a plethora of choices for you to be able to find the answer that you need. Or for example, you want to know where your crush has been, you just go to Facebook, look for his or her name, and probably you would know based on his public posts his whereabouts if you want to stan him or something. But of course, when you talk about inquiry-based learning in this context, we're not going to talk about how stalking your crush or probably knowing the latest news about your favorite K-pop band. We're talking about more practical things like being able to search for the information for you to be able to work diligently as a student, be able to answer essays as requested by your faculty members, or probably when you become professionals, to be able to search for information and to search for knowledge for you to be able to do your job correctly and to be able to go beyond what you need to do. So I think it's important for you to be able to learn about inquiry-based learning and to actually do inquiry-based learning, because it's usually synonymous to lifelong learning. It means that when you know how to learn by asking and actively seeking information, you become a lifelong learner. And as a lifelong learning, it's a 21st century skill, and you become a good professional and a good citizen in this country. So as a learning technique or as a teaching strategy, what are the theoretical foundations of inquiry-based learning? So we actually have three. And the first one is John Dewey's theory of connected experiences. It means that in order for us to learn, our actual experiences and the connections between our experiences actually helps us form the things that we know now and the things that inform our behavior. Dewey suggests that there are four stages that are cyclical that are involved in this process of learning that is related to connected experiences. The first one is concrete experience. The second is reflective observation. Third is abstract conceptualization. And next is active experimentation. So now let's give an instance where we could apply these principles. So for example, you're trying to cook sinangag for breakfast. And then when you tried tasting your sinangag, you found that it's too salty, or the rice is too soggy, or there's too much sahog that you've put into that fried rice. Basta it doesn't taste good. So you reflect, no? You go to the second stage, you reflect and you observe what happened, where did I go wrong? Probably I've put too much salt, or I've put too much oil or too less of oil. I was too generous with my onions and my garlic, or I burnt my garlic. That's why my sinangag is so black, or something like that. And then you conceptualize what were the properties of salt that made it taste this way, or what were the properties of oil that made the rice so soggy, or um, at what temperature of fire, and how long is this exposure of the garlic for me to be able to keep it from burning. So there's something going in our mind trying to theorize how will I be able to not commit the same mistakes in cooking sinangag as I've done it today. So on another day, on another breakfast, you try to cook and experiment on the conceptualizations you've had. No? Okay, so I'm only going to expose the garlic for 3 minutes in low fire so that it doesn't get burned. Or probably I just put a dab of salt. Or probably I should mash the rice more so that the sinangag doesn't look so clumpy. And then I try it, and then that's another concrete experience for me to see if I perfected my sinangag. So that's how, in terms of John Dewey, that's how active, inquiry-based learning works. So the next theory that is related to inquiry-based learning is Levi-Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. So if you would look at the slide, you would find that there are 3 concentric circles, and they look like a crust, mantle, and core of the earth. So basically, in order for us to learn, we learn usually in the proximal zone of development. And that is the mantle, of the earth model. So in the core, you see that there are things that the learner can already do on his own. Like for example, at your stage as grade 11 students, you can probably write in English and Tagalog, know what subject-verb agreement is. You probably know by now that water is H2O, or probably would know now that the 3 laws of motion by Isaac Newton. These are already things that you know. But in the outer circle, or the crust of the zone of development, these are the things that the learner cannot do yet. So for example, to those STEM students out there, you probably don't know how to open a human cadaver yet. Obviously, you cannot do that yet. Or if anyone there is an arts and design major, probably you don't know how to operate a very high fidelity camera yet, because that's not the things that you can't do yet. But there are also things that you can do as long as you're supported by someone. For example, for STEM students who would probably become nurses in the future, you don't know how to do injections on people, but you do know what injections are for. So, and probably you know a little bit about the anatomy of the musculature of the body. You know that the muscle in the shoulder is triangular. And so when somebody supports you, you will be able to do injection, an intramuscular injection. So that's the zone of proximal development. It means that there are things that you might not know, but you'll be able to do if you're supported. Means that if you have questions, there are going to be people who will have answers for you. And that's inquiry-based learning. So the third theory is Jerome Bruner's theory. So Bruner suggests that learning is an active process, and learners construct new ideas or concepts based upon existing knowledge. So this is a good rationale or justification why you have a spiral type of education when you were in junior high school. Because usually, in order for us to learn how to write, we have to learn alphabets first. And after learning about alphabets, we learn how to form words, we learn vocabulary, and then after learning vocabulary, we learn the relationship between words in a sentence, and then we probably that's going to be the next stepping stone is for us to write paragraphs, and after writing paragraphs, we write prose and poetry, and we write also about nonfiction, etc., etc. So it means that the complex set of knowledge that you have now was based from an existing knowledge that you've had before that was probably more basic. So me, the teacher, even if I want to finish my course, in the next 2 days and start discussing about conclusions and recommendations right now, you wouldn't be able to catch up because you don't have the previous knowledge of how we are going to write about conclusions and recommendations, because you don't know how to write findings yet. You don't know how to write a proposal yet. So it means that in order for us to go to the next or more complex type of knowledge, we, the teachers, and you have to learn about the basic knowledge first. And usually for Jerome Bruner, it means that you are going to cull it or get it from your experience. So according to Bruner, there are certain processes for us to be able to do this process in an active and inquiry-based learning way. The first one is selection and transformation of information, followed by decision making, generating hypothesis, making meaning from information and experiences. So to demonstrate this process, for example, you are experiencing a symptom. For example, nose bleeding. Okay, so what you do is you try to find information, and usually for millennials like you or for netizens like you go to the internet and you Google your symptom. You write in your search box nose bleeding or epistaxis in medical term, and then Google will present you a set of results, which is usually thousands of results. So you're presented with a lot of options of information sources. And eventually you have to make decisions, and you have certain criteria for the decisions that you make. For example, I want to make sure that the site I'm going to is something that's credible, and that the people who are filling in the information in that experience are actually qualified. They're really doctors. And then after that, you try to get as much information as you want. What does nose bleeding mean? And then you will be presented. You choose a site. You will be presented with a lot of, preliminary diagnosis. For example, this is a sign of hemorrhage, or probably this is a sign of brain damage, or this is a sign of change in altitude. So now you're presented a lot of information about your bleeding nose, and you are trying to decide what's happening to you. So probably you have to make meaning from the information. You have to connect it with the other things that you experience. Like for example, my nose is bleeding. Am I also experiencing fever? Because if I have, then probably I have to go to a diagnosis that has that. But remember guys, you shouldn't self-diagnose. And probably you might need to consult your previous experiences. No, do I have someone who has had their nose bled, or did I experience nose bleeding before? And what did it mean? What did the doctor say that time? Is it similar to this one? And then you process all this information, without probably a teacher telling you what to do. And you can probably make some sort of inference of what's happening to you. Is this something that's normal? Something that's expected given the temperature or given the altitude where you are? And of course, ultimately, in order for you to know, you probably have to seek medical practitioners in order for you to know whether this nose bleeding is correct. So in short, for you to be able to know something and get information, get reliable information of something, you don't just go to one person or one site or to one source. Usually you present yourself, or you have access to a lot of sources, and you try to process within yourself which information is the most valuable, which is the most credible, which one is the most useful for me. And then what I do is that I put this information together in my head. I try to conceptualize, make a concept map inside my head. What is the answer to my question? Given all these resources and reading materials and people I've asked. And that basically is inquiry-based learning. So, what are the benefits of inquiry-based learning? So, the first one is that it elevates your interpretative thinking through graphic skills, which you may experience when you try to create a concept map in your head or through an actual sketchpad, and you try to connect the ideas together from the information and the sources you have. When you are an inquiry based learner, you just don't take all the information that you have and take them as truth. You have to be very critical and you have to interpret whatever information is served upon you. And this is very important, especially during these times wherein there are a lot of fake news, there are a lot of fake information that you can find in social media. And it's very important for you to be able to decipher this information, to verify this information that you're trying to get, and see if it's really useful or to see if it's really true and if you can make decisions out of it or not use it at all. And it also improves students' learning abilities because you don't need to be told what to do. You already know that in order for me to learn more, to be able to answer this assignment, I need to get information. I have to investigate actively, get out of my chair or go to a computer, go online, and be able to find the information that I need. Third is that it also widens the learner's vocabulary. In this class, you'll be exposed to a lot of research articles, and usually the research articles are very technical. They use words that may sound as jargons to you. So these jargons, you need to learn about them for you to be able to relish the research articles that you're reading. You might need to have a dictionary with you or to have handy-dandy Google to define the terms for you. And of course, that's going to be positive for you because it is going to help you increase the vocabulary that you already have. Next is that it facilitates problem-solving acts. I think that's very self-explanatory. Next is that it increases social awareness and cultural knowledge. When you get to be exposed to a lot of information, you also get to be exposed with a lot of social conditions. You also are going to be exposed to how certain countries and different cultures, subcultures interpret reality, interpret the information that you are trying to give them. So it's very important for you to do inquiry-based learning so that you can learn about the world more, become more aware about the things that you don't have personal experience. Next benefit of inquiry-based learning is that it encourages cooperative learning. Remember that when we ask questions, we don't only help ourselves, we also help the people who we ask questions to because they also get information from us. Next is that inquiry-based learning provides mastery and procedural knowledge, and it also encourages high-order thinking strategies. So it teaches you to analyze, to look at patterns, to disaggregate the data, to see whether certain factors influence the data, and not just take the information as it is. Next is that it also hastens conceptual understanding of the phenomenon that you're trying to look into. It means that you just don't know the phenomenon by name. You know the phenomenon and its definition. You know the concepts that are related to it. You know the context that are related to it, not just the name, not just memorization. So that's inquiry-based learning. I hope that at the end of this semester, after my class, you'll be able to become learners who are very active and inquiry-based. And so let's try out our inquiry-based learning skills through this next exercise. Okay, so I will be giving phenomena, certain realities, and certain issues that you need to investigate upon. For St. John, I want you to study about certain health conditions, illness conditions, or anything about Filipino well-being. And for St. Martin, you have two options for the general topics that you can explore. The first one is about overseas Filipino workers, Filipino migration, and any condition related to that. Or you can choose to study about disaster experiences, environmental concerns, and disaster management in the Philippines. So you can choose any of the two general topics. So now that your general topics are assigned, I want you to ask around people that you already know that are related to these topics, or you can probably look online or look for any reading materials related to this topic. And per research group, I want you to come up with 3 topics on specific issues on the general topic that was assigned to you. Later on, one of those topics will be selected by me, and that's going to be your topic for your thesis writing in my class. For each topic, please write 1 to 3 sentences justification. Why do you think this topic is worth researching on? So here are some example topics for your reference. Example, experiences of hardship among Filipino single women OFWs in Japan. Or you may also look into how people who experience landslides rebuild their lives. Or for health, you can probably study about the work-life experiences of people who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Or you want to talk about the coping mechanisms of people living with vision impairment or visual impairment. So these are some certain examples of specific topics that you may explore in my class. So each group will have to submit first the list of all the members in that group for each group, strictly for each group. Second is the 3 titles that were conceived by the group. And 3, the short justifications of each title or each topic. Next, you have to submit the topic's justifications and name of the members to either your president, secretary, or any related officer. And then, that officer will collect all of the information from all the groups, put everything in a Word document, and send to me via email. The deadline is on November 9, 5 p.m. It should be in my email. So that's the end of my podcast. I hope you learned a lot, and see you all when I get back.